Welcome to session 227 of the Bible in a Year commentary. If you started this series on the 1st of January, then today should be the 15th of August. Today we'll be looking at 2 Chronicles 13 to 17 and Psalm 72. But so far in 1st and 2nd Chronicles, we've read through the introductory genealogies, King David and Solomon's reigns, and started the reigns of Judah's kings from Rehoboam to the exile. While separate books in our Bible, 1st and 2nd Chronicles tell one story, giving a recap of the Old Testament from Adam all the way through to the Jews' return from exile. We read through the opening chapters of the book dedicated to the genealogies of God's people. These covered from Adam to David, focusing on Judah, the tribe of the royal family, Levi, the tribe of the priests, and Benjamin, the tribe of the first king Saul. There are also genealogies of the people who had returned from exile. As we move into the section of the book focused on David, we saw the author use David as a model for what an ideal future king could look like. He was a shepherd, a ruler, a priest. He united the tribes, defeated their enemies, established peace. He served as a second Moses, designing the temple, gathering its resources, and organising the Levites and the priests. David did everything he could to set Solomon up well. He then stepped back to allow Solomon to be king. Starting 2 Chronicles, Solomon immediately set himself apart from the other kings, asking God not for wealth or power, but wisdom. Because of this, God granted Solomon the wisdom that he had asked for and the wealth and success that he hadn't. Solomon gathered the remaining resources for the temple and then had it built. He brought the Ark of the Covenant and all the gold dedicated to God. Solomon then prayed over the temple and the people, and God's presence fell. God then warned Solomon that as long as his people remained humble and repented of their sin, God would forgive them and rescue them. But if they don't, God will cast them from the land and destroy this temple. Solomon went on to build more cities and establish trade routes before passing his reign to his son, Rehoboam. Under Solomon, the people had prospered, but they were also overworked. Because of this, they came to Rehoboam and asked if he planned to lead them as his father did, or whether he would be more lenient on them. Rehoboam told them he would be harsher, which caused 10 of the 12 tribes to secede and set up Jeroboam as the king of the new Israel in the north. The two southern tribes became known as just Judah. Despite Rehoboam's early mistake, he led quite well in his early years, but then he turned away from God and God removed his protection. Egypt came and sacked Jerusalem, taking away its wealth. It was only because Rehoboam realized the error of his ways and repented to God so that Egypt wouldn't destroy them completely. After Rehoboam came Abijah. Let's jump in with today's reading, 2 Chronicles 13 to 17. During Abijah's reign, there was a war between Israel in the north and Judah in the south. Israel's troops outnumbered Judah's troops 2-1, but Abijah wasn't afraid. He pointed out that by attacking Judah, Israel was actually fighting against their own God. They had already abandoned him by removing all of his priests and setting up their own. They had their own places of worship and golden calves that they bowed down before. Not only did Israel have more troops, but they also planned an ambush as well. But God was with Judah, and they easily defeated Israel's superior numbers. Judah defeated their enemy and reclaimed land from them. Next up was King Asa, who worked tirelessly to remove all worship of other gods from Judah. He used the peacetime to reinforce Judah's cities, protecting them from attack. The king of Ethiopia came to attack Judah, and again his troops outnumbered Asa's a little over 2-1. But Asa turned to God and relied on him, so God helped them defeat their enemies. Judah chased them all away back to their land and returned home with much loot. A little later, one of God's prophets came to Asa and challenged him that the people were slipping back into their worship of other gods. With renewed vigour, Asa went out and again removed the worship of foreign gods. He gathered the people and caused them to recommit themselves to God, making many sacrifices. There were a few places that Asa failed to get rid of, but on the whole, Asa's heart and intent were with God. But then the new king of Israel in north came and started building new cities that would cause problems for Judah. Rather than turn to God, this time Asa turned to the king of Syria and offered him gold to stop supporting Israel and attack them instead. The king of Syria agreed, and Israel quickly dropped the new cities they had been building to defend themselves from this new attack. But God was angry and sent one of his prophets to tell Asa that because he sought the help of Syria rather than turning to God, Judah would be plagued by wars for years to come. Unfortunately, Asa refused to repent and instead became cruel in his anger. Asa's reign ended with him disease-riddled, unwilling to turn to God for help. After Asa came Jehoshaphat, who was faithful to God. He fortified more of Judah's cities and organised officials and Levites to go around the nation teaching the people God's ways. God's favour was on Judah during this time and he allowed it to prosper. Their enemies saw that God was with them and so decided to offer gifts rather than attack. But that is 2 Chronicles 13 to 17. Now let's look at Psalm 72. This psalm is attributed to Solomon and falls into the category of royal psalm. It was likely read at the coronation of a new king. As with most royal psalms, this psalm can be read through a messianic lens, as though talking about the future. As with most royal psalms, this psalm can be read through a messianic lens, as though talking about the future king, Jesus. It's also the psalm that ends the second book of the Psalms, which covers Psalms 42 to 72. The last 3 verses are a doxology that end the book rather than just ending the psalm. Here is a summary of the structure, but I would recommend checking out the written version of this commentary in the description to see the structure properly for yourself. But we start with verses 1 to 6, a prayer for the king for justice and provision. Verses 7 to 11, a prayer for peace. Verses 12 to 14, the king will deliver the poor and oppressed. Verses 15 to 17, blessings for the king. And then verses 18 to 20, the final doxology. The psalmist opens with a request that God grants the king justice and righteousness. We've seen through many psalms now that justice is a core beat of God's heart, and it is to be the same for their king. The king is to lead with justice and righteousness, and when he does, it leads the people to prosperity. They are to defend the poor and the needy, and resist and defeat the oppressors. This then leads to peace in the land, both internally as righteous people flourish, but also with surrounding nations. Other nations will want to trade and bring gifts. And then the psalmist turns back to justice. The king is the one who delivers the poor, the weak, and the needy. He rescues them from violence and oppression. Having prayed that the king might rule well, the psalmist now prays for the king himself. May the king live a long life and be blessed with wealth. May others continue to pray for him and offer him their support. May we see the nation flourish because of him so that his name lives on forever as a good king. In this, we see a good principle for leadership. The people are to pray for and support their leaders, and the leader is to use their position to benefit the people they lead, not themselves. And in it all, both the people and the leader must recognize that the real power and authority is God himself, which is where the psalmist ends. Blessed be the God of Israel. He is the one who does miraculous things, and may his name be lifted high. Then comes the phrase, the prayers of David, the son of Jesse, are ended. This suggests we're meant to read this as David's prayer for Solomon before he passes on the crown to him. And the strongest push to see this psalm as a messianic psalm that talks about the future king that would be found in Jesus is the fact that no king of Israel ever lives up to this psalm. At face value, Solomon comes closest, but the more you dig into his story, you see the people were burdened with heavy taxes while Solomon grew richer. The Messiah will be the one that serves the poor and the needy, that leads with righteousness and justice, and that brings peace, not just to Israel, but to the whole earth. Thanks for joining us today. Take a moment to reflect on what you've read and share your thoughts or questions below. If you're watching in the future, then you can click here for the next session, or you can find the full playlist just down here. To receive these daily commentaries in your email inbox, subscribe via the link in the description below. Have a great day, and I'll see you tomorrow.